Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Adam Green here with No More News. Thank you all for joining me today, Thursday, April 24th, 2025. Got a huge show with a new guest for you guys. It's going to be a big one. Joining me is Pox Populi. Pox Populi, Angelo Plume. He is the editor at Countercurrents. He had me on for a podcast a few months ago. We've been following on Twitter for quite a while. He's super based. He's green pilled. He's Jesus questioned. He's running out of patience as well, as I am. So it's going to be a good one. We're going to talk about all types of stuff. The Jordan Peterson, the what else are we covering? Let's see here. Some of the internet Christian stuff over Easter, the Pope, Trump, BBC video. It's going to be huge. Good to have you here. What's up, Angelo? How you doing?
Hi, Adam. How you doing? It's an honor to be on your live stream. This has been one of the most consistently best shows, I think, going back several years now, going back to like the COVID years and everything. So I am delighted to be on your show.
Thank you. Very nice of you to say that. I'm glad to have you here, and I enjoyed our talk. We had a really good talk on your Countercurrents podcast a few months ago. Glad to finally have you back on, or do it on my show.
Absolutely.
So where, you got a little bit of an accent. Where are you joining us from? What's your background? Tell us about yourself a bit.
Yeah, accent-wise, it's probably changed a bit over the years. I was born in the Midwest of the United States, but my father's Italian, and he came to the States in the 80s, and then I moved to Italy myself. So I did like the reverse journey of my father and went back to my ancestral fatherland. And then I lived there for a while, and then life just took me on all sorts of crazy turns. I lived in France, worked there, lived there for a bit. My mother's side is Irish, so I always wanted to visit Ireland as well, and I had the chance to do that and spend some quality time there. I was just always really interested, even as a kid, in going back to where my family's from and like actually setting foot on the places where they came from. And, you know, I spent my childhood reading stories about Irish history and mythology and the Roman Empire and the Renaissance and all that stuff. So it was great to finally
Europe was always calling you back, like how the
Exactly.
Jews say like Israel was calling them. They had to make Aliyah. You made Aliyah back to the homeland. That's so based. I have that all the time too. My wife was just talking to me today, trying to get me to go to Scotland and finish the homeland trip that we did like maybe 2 years ago, and now go to Scotland and Ireland.
Yeah, I remember watching those episodes, those live stream shows you did about your trip to England. I felt really happy for you. I was really happy that you're able to do that. So you know what I'm talking about. There is something special about going back to where your forebears came from. And then also, you know, I just wanted to see with my own eyes, you know, the things that were going on elsewhere in Europe. So this was going back quite a long time now. I've spent my entire adult life in Europe. So I've seen, I think I was just on the cusp of when Europe was still comparatively, relatively a very nice place to live, the European countries, Western European countries. They had homogeneous populations. They had, you know, they were relatively safe, forward thinking. They had lots of things going in their favor. When I moved to Italy, Italy was the third most powerful country in Europe, had the third biggest economy. The European Union actually had a bigger economy than the United States. The euro was doing well enough. There's a lot of controversy behind who it's working well for, but we'll leave that to the side. But since those years, I've just watched all of this, all of these things that I care about so much, the people, these nations, these countries, just get increasingly degraded, and the quality of life is decreasing. A lot of it has to do with the immigration issue, which I'm sure you're well aware of. And then, yeah, so That's pretty much how I got involved in this Pox Populi persona and talking about these things on the internet.
And you are talking about them on your Substack as well as Twitter, but your Substack, I was taking a look through this. How long you been online writing articles and active? And were you like anonymous for a while with the Pox Populi name?
Yeah, I always had the Pox Populi as sort of like a stage name, but I always showed my face.
Okay. You were always face revealed.
Yeah.
Always face forward, yeah.
I just I don't think I'm saying anything. I guess it depends where you are now. Perhaps.
No, you're very reasonable, and there's no reason to hide yourself. And yeah.
Pox Populi was just like, I like puns. I like wordplay, and this was almost 10 years ago now. So populism was all the rage. And so it's a kind of a play on Vox Populi, the voice of the people. Mm-hmm. But I realized that we actually have a lot of diseases, illnesses, poxes in our own culture. And actually, I thought I had a pretty good grasp on what those illnesses were, but your work, the work that you've been doing, helped me understand that this goes a lot deeper, actually. So,
mentioning poxes, I can't remember exactly what it is, but I recall like some verse or scripture where it says it will be like I think it's Judaism or Christianity will be a pox on us. Somebody wrote that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, definitely that's one of the poxes. And surprisingly, I got also a clip of a rabbi that's saying pestilence is like going to destroy all the Gentiles and the nations in the end times, and disease and plague and pestilence. So that's a pox as well. I think it was the Mashiach was going to be a pox on something, or Judaism was a pox on us all, something along those lines. But so 10 years, you said you got into it 10 years ago. You've been with editor at Countercurrents that whole time?
Countercurrents is recent. Countercurrents, I've been the managing editor there for a little over a year now, I think. So I started off just making YouTube videos like everyone else did.
Are you still on YouTube?
No, not really. I never really liked making videos anyway. I was just, I would open up a very small HP laptop and just talk into the webcam. And that's basically what I was doing. There was no editing. There was no fancy special effects. And then when Substack came along, I was very excited about that because I've always felt that I'm better as a writer anyway than a visual media presenter or even a live stream host, a streamer,
You're a good tweeter. You're a good tweeter. I like your tweets.
Yeah, thanks.
What's Twitter's the AQ? American question?
Oh, the
American question. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that too. I always see you talking about like Americans not understanding Europe or their criticisms of Europe are wrong or something. That'll be the next question. You can segue into that if you like.
Yeah, well, so this is a recurring topic that I've observed for quite some time, and I've lived through it as well. And of course, being born in America and then moving to Europe and living in Europe, and also being a very Europeanized American. Even when I was growing up in the Midwest, the influence of my Italian father was very strong, and I definitely stood out as not quite like one of the other, regular sloppy Joe eating Americans at school.
Italians have a lot of like ethnic pride, right? They have a lot of national pride.
It's funny. I wouldn't really know because we didn't really associate with like an Italian American community or anything like that. My dad just spent a lot of his time working really hard at a local factory. He would spend like from sun up to sundown at this factory, doing what he could to provide for a family of 3 kids and his wife. And he never really, I think, expressed any interest in. I think he left Italy with a desire to really become an American. Talking with him, he told me his dream was to like make it to Wyoming and live like a cowboy.
Was he Catholic?
He was, but then that's a good question actually. He was. All my Italian family is Catholic. And I have a relative, an uncle, who's actually probably one of the last truly devout and based. He's been a very big influence on me as well. But he's probably like one of the last truly devout, serious Catholics in all of Italy. He really takes it seriously. He knows the faith, but he's also not a cuck. Like, he's one of the Catholics that I would say he's one of the good ones, and he helped me learn a lot in the journey that I've been on.
He's the most based, more than all the Vatican and Rome and the Pope and
more than Cardinal Sarah.
Okay.
That everyone's
is he one of these like pre-Vatican II traditionalists?
He's very traditionalist, yeah. And it's tough though, because he knows that Italy is being swamped by migrants and there's creeping Islamification. And it's really affecting Italy in all the ways that these things always do. Your identity becomes diluted. There's crime problems. There's terrorist problems. But at the same time, he tries to live this Christ-like example and be welcoming and, try and be a good person. So he'll say things like, look, they're here now. I know that there's an agenda behind this all. I know there's people pulling the strings to make this happen, but we have to still be Christ-like to the ones that are here. We can't just be, nasty to them or things like that. So it's that interesting moral drama that Christianity and Catholicism and universalism can have on someone's psyche. It's something that I think, it's easier said than done, but we have to let that go. But of course, I would never say that to my uncle. It's like, this is his faith. It's been a big part of his life for such a long time. I'm not going to tell them, just let that go. But on Twitter, I have no such hesitation.
I'm the same way with my mom, by the way. Like, I'm not telling her Jesus is Jewish and fake and you're brainwashed and stupid and you're not going to heaven. It's not real. Like, I don't say that shit to her.
Right. Yeah, you have to pick your battles, and
especially if they're really old too. They're really old.
Exactly. Like, what does it matter if you get them to see things differently? It's like they're getting up in the years anyway.
Yeah, and if they've spent their whole life since birth being told something, like, do you want them to have a mental breakdown right before?
Right. Yeah, and because this isn't easy. I used to be.
Were you Christian? Tell us about your Christian journey, your green pilling Christian question journey.
Yeah. So my dad, when he became, more and more Americanized, he let the Catholic faith go. He met my mother, and they converted to evangelicalism, and I was born into that.
An Irish Catholic and an Irish. Italian. I'm sorry. Catholic Italian, Irish Italian.
There's a reason why I had a very odd upbringing. And
the oldest. Hey, Christians, follow your oldest tradition and become a Christian Zionist Catholic.
Well, they've kind of become that. So being evangelicals, they're very pro-Israel. Yeah. And it's a very strange development. But I was raised in that sort of evangelical milieu, and it was a strange relationship with it, because I did believe it, quote unquote believe it. I went along with it. I would go to Bible study groups, and I read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. We were expected to memorize it, basically. When I was a kid, I had pretty much, I wouldn't say the entire Bible, but huge chunks of it memorized. We were drilled into like Bible verse memorization, full book and chapter memorization.
Was this at home or at church or
at home?
Bible
at church,
school at
Bible
home?
Study, vacation Bible school.
Yeah, I did those.
Yeah.
I talk about the pressure to get baptized at like Bible camps and vacation Bible schools. They do the music and they go, "Come on up if you need to be saved." Yeah. It's such psychological manipulation and group think and group pressure.
So I went to also for how long was it now? I think I went for 2 years before I told my parents I really didn't like it, and finally managed to get them to take me out. But for 2 years I was going to a private evangelical Christian high school even, and they'd have like a Friday church service basically, where it was very much like that. You know how the evangelicals do it, like you said, there's all this compelling music and pop music, and it's like a big spectacle.
Yeah.
And
A lot
it's
of
supposed
guilt,
to
a lot of guilt and fear and love bombing. It's very manipulative.
People would be like swaying back and forth as if they were being, filled with the Holy Spirit, or some of them would start speaking in tongues.
Oh, really? They got their hands
yeah.
in the air. That would creep me out when they'd be like, oh.
Yeah. The whole show.
Yeah.
And
you
so,
see this one? Pope Francis demands God remove walls around heaven. That's funny.
Oh, Bergoglio. Oh, Francis.
And this one, children are forced. We could have watched the video. They're forced to put on a cross and walk across eggshells and do all this like weird torture, trauma stuff of Jesus.
Wow.
And this guy says, "I failed to see the problem with this."
Oh no. Huh.
Anyway, sorry. Keep going about your green pilling, your school, telling your parents. I interrupted. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I was just like, so, I tried my best to go along with it. I would evangelize to, local neighbor kids, or I would go with the church youth ministry. I lived in a pretty rough area in the United States. At one point, it was like the third most dangerous place in the entire country.
Why was it so dangerous?
Just crime. Violent crime, drugs. It was like a Rust Belt town.
Was it like a white town, black town?
Well,
you grew up around a lot of black people?
I did, but they were all pretty much confined to the inner city. And then the rest of the population would be white, kind of like, I guess, white trash.
So white and poor.
Yeah, white.
Yeah.
Because all the factories had closed. It was all like decrepit, dilapidation, and then of course like the Hispanic population just kept growing and growing during these years.
Too. No wonder you were dreaming of going back to Italy. Like it's this romanticized, like nostalgic,
absolutely.
like almost also instinctual, like desire to be in that area. And it is amazing. You were talking earlier how in like it's only been in like one generation in Europe. It's been completely demographically, altered forever. Basically, and it was
the reason why I
homogenous
get
and traditional,
I take
and
this
now
so
it's
seriously is because I know what I'm like from Europe's future. I say it very often, like I'm from the future. I can tell you exactly where this leads, exactly how this ends, and it's not good. And I really get frustrated, and I take this almost personally because I'm seeing these European nations being transformed in front of my eyes into exactly what I grew up in and exactly what I left, because it was, not a very nice place, and it's demographically discombobulated, and it's low trust, and it's ugly, and these poor European peoples, they have no idea what they're in for. We've had in Europe, there's been a long history of war and tensions and ethnic rivalries between Europeans. And then, of course, there's the gypsies. We've had those for 1,000 years, never integrated. If you think about how long Roma gypsies have been in Europe, but have never integrated or assimilated it, they just completely dismantle the idea that you can integrate people. They've been here for so long, yet they have never done it. But now with like this hyper diversity, where we have people from all over the world, the thing with Islam, I know there's the whole counter jihad, like gatekeeping and control opposition, but it is a problem. And then you have this, through American media supremacy, you have the same sort of like ghetto black culture that's taken over American culture. It's now happening in Europe. So you see this sort of ghettoization, blackification of European culture. And I just find it very frustrating, and it's a shame to see happening, but hopefully it can be halted and reversed. I don't know.
I can't imagine how that could be happening. Oh wait, here's the BBC's youth channel. Some old Queen Eleanor. This is BBC's version of Queen Eleanor.
Eleanor of Aquitaine. I lived in Aquitaine. Eleanor of Aquitaine is like one of the most important, just in general, an important figure of French history, English history. This is desecration. This is sacrilege. This is so hateful. But then it also makes blacks look so dumb and ugly. I think this must be like 4chan behind it.
It's like they're just trying to enrage. They're trying to enrage both sides by doing this type of depiction.
I've never really received a response from an African, from a black person, whether it's a black person living in England or the United States. But I have asked. I'll share a picture, for example, of, you name it, some European figure of folklore, mythology, or actual genuine history, like a genuine European person, like Eleanor of Aquitaine. And I'll post a picture of that figure being portrayed by a black actor. And I've asked, do black people even want this? Because at some point, I imagine even some black people must feel insulted by that. I mean, especially when it's this kind of thing, an obese black woman rapping about being Eleanor of Aquitaine. Come on.
Let's play it. I haven't watched it yet. I was waiting to watch it with you on the show. Let's see.
Eleanor of Aquitaine, my name's Queen Eleanor of Aquitaine. 3 sons, they all want to reign. My name's Queen Eleanor of Aquitaine. Oh, no. I guess John was lying, saying Richard had died. Traveled to Austria to be by his side. To set him free, I paid for his release.
We was kings.
This fighting must cease. Made my boys promise to always be friends. Gave Richard his crown back to his peaceful end. Then I supported my youngest King John. Tell you ain't no job harder than being a mom. No.
It's basically like a Beyonce song as well. If you listen to it, it sounds like a Beyonce song. It's just, it's shameful.
And we're not surprised by this. They're like doing the meme. Do they have to know, whoever's doing this, they know it's a meme online. They know that it outrages people. And then they try to do it even further. It's getting obvious now how they're trying to antagonize with this. Like rubbing it, insulting us, and rubbing it in our faces. It's disgraceful. It's disgusting.
And, the demographics of European countries, even Western European countries, like England, for example, which have been hit really hard and really fast with mass migration. But, England is still like overall 85%, white British. Now they're projected to be a minority very soon, within like 25 to 30 years, which just goes to show how fast these waves of migration have been. But just imagine if this is what they're doing when the native population of England is still at 85, 88%, something like that. Maybe I'm thinking of maybe that might be France. Maybe England's a bit lower. I don't know. But just imagine what it's going to be like when, the native English population is 60%, 50%. They will just, I don't know, will they completely rewrite all of British history? And completely just write out the native white population. I don't know, but they very well could. Yeah. They're doing it now in front of our eyes.
The rabbi clip comes to mind where he's like, it's cultural genocide is what they call it. And blot out the memory of Amalek and all the statues coming down all over America. And are they taking statues down in Europe? Has there been statues removed?
They did. They tore down some statues, for example, in England, some statues of people who owned a slave or had a colony. They've torn down statues of Cecil Rhodes. In Italy, so Italy's not quite as quote unquote woke, but there are pockets of it. So Rome, for example, it's got a left-wing mayor. And they recently started taking down anything that referenced Italy's colonial enterprises in Libya or Ethiopia. So streets that were named after military victories in a battle in Libya, they've been renamed. Statues of generals who led expeditions into Africa, they've been torn down. So it is happening here as well.
You see it happen a whole lot more in America. So here's another example. Anne Boleyn, Queen of England, like redhead, extremely pale skin. This is, what was it, BBC or Netflix's reinterpretation of this? A new queen in town. Hey, there's a new boss in town. It seems to be always the redhead. The redheads
sent
too.
$5 on Rumble. HHHGNG.
I have no idea what that means. Like,
I don't either.
they did the same thing with the Disney remake of Little Mermaid, right?
Oh, yeah. Little Mermaid, Snow White.
Yep. Yo, look who's here.
Redeceived sent $20 on Rumble. Great to see Angelo, Pox on the show Adam. Angelo, when you guys get to the AG, educate the American megacons on why the EU wasn't set up to screw over America as Trump recently said.
Yeah.
Thank you, Riddis TV. Thanks, buddy. Thanks, Henrik. Good to see you here. What does he say? Educate Americans on why EU wasn't set up to screw over America. I know. I've never even heard such a thing. That sounds like Trump just made it up. Yeah.
So that's going back to the AQ thing. Yeah. So like, just to fast forward then. So I grew up in that evangelical situation, but and even though I was participating in it, I always had also a lot of questions. So I would go to the pastor after sermons and ask, questions about, a basic question. Why is God commanding the Israelites to massacre all the women and children and animals of this tribe? Doesn't that sound a bit wrong? Or just, the Bible's full of contradictions, and I would notice them even as a kid. So I always had this conflicting relationship with it. Eventually, when I moved back to Europe and I saw all these lovely cathedrals and churches, and I saw that there was the Islamification happening, I thought maybe actually, okay, the solution is going back to Catholicism and rediscovering our Catholic or Christian roots and holding on to that identity. And then I realized, actually, no, that's probably a dead end. And the work you do has helped me understand that. So now I pretty much have let that go. And then as far as
at what age? I'm curious. What age did you leave Christianity?
Oh, as far as really letting it go and stepping over it, and also seeing it as a much more subversive and Judeaic agenda, that would be very recent. I would say probably over the last 5 years.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I mean,
another great story. I interviewed a guy the other day, Aseric Media. He's like a pro-pagan guy, former Christian, former Catholic, former Orthodox, and now we got another one. People being free from the spell, the Abrahamic matrix spell.
And that's really how I would describe it. It's I do sometimes get very angry with some Christians, especially the ones that are online, the e-crusaders, the ones who think it's based that Christians tore down all the temples and smashed all the Roman statues and things like that, or whatever. But Christianity is not going away anytime soon. A lot of people on my side of things are going to be Christians, and so I don't know what the the final solution, to use that term, is, but
to the Christian question, just so
right
to the Christian question,
to the Christian question.
Yeah, that's a good one, a good tweet. Final solution to the Christian question, to the Jesus question.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To the Jesus question, but it is just about escaping the matrix, the morality matrix of it. I really don't like how, especially being half Italian, and my ancestors, we've done our family tree. We go back very far in Italy, and I wouldn't say I'm a direct descendant of some Roman centurion or something, but almost,
pure Esau, pure Roman.
Exactly. And Romans are the bad guys in the Christ story. And when you realize what that must mean for the spirituality, the well-being of a people's psyche, that you follow a religion that casts you as the villains.
Yeah. Your people we're worshiping demons, and we're heathen barbarians. Yeah. And being Italian, all the Edom stuff, you must really, that hits extra close home to you.
It does.
The Edom stuff.
When I hear them talking about, we destroy Rome and Rome is the villain, and I'm just you're talking about my ancestors, you're talking about a great civilization. Sure, it had some some iffy moments. But, what did you guys build? Hebrews, Jews? You rode on the coattails of the Roman Empire, and then you couldn't defeat it, so you subverted it with a theological capture. Well done, I guess. And then they talk about they want to heal the world and we all need to get along and all this stuff, but they hold on to a 2,000-year-old grudge because of 70 AD and the destruction of the temple. There's that famous picture of, I think it's Eric Weinstein, flipping off the Arch of Titus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's just like.
Or projecting the Israeli flag on the Arch of Titus. Remember when they did that?
Oh yeah, that was such an intentional. They knew what they were doing with that. Yeah. Of course they did. They could have chosen. There are literally countless monuments in Rome that you could project a flag of solidarity onto, and they chose the Arch of Titus. That's not an accident.
At the same time, they projected it on like one of the old Nazi buildings, and then they showed the before and after with the swastikas, and then the Star of David on it. They know what they're doing. Judea in Rome.
Exactly.
Jerusalem
and of course,
in
Rome. The Christian question comes into play here when. So it's not so much a Catholic thing. Like my Catholic family aren't pro-Israel, but lots of Christians of other denominations and some Catholics, but like for example, the evangelicals are extremely pro-Israel, as you know. And so when we have people who are following a religion that either teaches you that your ancestors were the villains, or you were immoral, didn't know right from wrong until we gave you the Torah, and then also teaches you to support this nation state in the Middle East and go to war for it and support its actions and give it unconditional support and military aid no matter what they're doing, even if they're annihilating children on a day-to-day basis. And people are supporting that primarily because they're Christians. Mm-hmm. We have a problem in our way of thinking. And so I don't know I don't want to take people's faith away from them. I think that being faithless is probably not a good thing to be. But I do want Christians, to see how their religion can be used against them, how it's been used against them throughout time. And I think that's what you've been doing as well. So it's a big issue, but definitely something needs to be done about it.
Another line they'll say is, Western Christianity and the Judeo-Christianity built Western civilization, right? We hear that all the time. Mm-hmm. Like the Zionist Geert Wilders here tweeted out on Easter. Let us remember, Goy, our culture is based on Christianity, Judaism, and humanism, not on Islam. How about paganism? They always want to say, they forget about ancient Rome and ancient Greece. And I
mean, there's just all of those things that he said there are untrue, or at least can be easily argued against. Even humanism, for example, let alone the absurdity of saying that Western civilization or European civilization is based on Judaism.
Yeah. Well, the last 1,700 years, they kind of did hijack it, but it was already built and the foundations were already there. There was already great empires and culture that they actually wiped away and destroyed.
Yeah, exactly.
Razed to the ground.
It just completely, humanism, the Enlightenment, it's all very recent stuff. And if you think about it in the grand scheme of history, and it doesn't define us. And if you escape the Judaic matrix, if you escape the Christian controlled opposition, and you rediscover what Europeans were like before the Red Sea pedestrians came over and gave us their morality and their religion, there's a rich history, not just of Greco-Roman law, but you also think about the Germanic peoples, and they had a huge influence on European Christianity. The reason that you can separate Christianity from Judaism, and there's a distinct European flavor of Christianity, it's thanks to the Greeks and the Romans. Obviously, they had first exposure, but then there was this huge Germanic influence as Christianity and the Germanic peoples came into contact. And they really brought a Germanic sensibility to Christianity. In fact, the Jesus Christ figure had to be reinterpreted as a warrior in order to appeal to Germanic peoples. But like you showed that tweet that I had referencing what Gert Wilder said, and it's like, yeah, I was about to fry up some bacon, but then I realized, my culture is based on Judaism, so I better not. You know, I'm off to the synagogue now to kvetch with my rabbi. Like, we're not. Yeah. Yes.
Well, the head of the EU, that woman, said that it's based on the Talmud, right? Europe's values are rooted in the Talmud European or something
values, crazy. That's just another
yeah.
ridiculous thing. That this is again.
Running out of patience.
Exactly. You know?
You guys hear that exhale, that sigh?
Like most people have never read the Talmud. Yeah. What is she talking about? But they can make this connection because it's true. Christianity does it is a branch on the tree of Judaism. It just is. And I suppose that people have just been taking this to its logical conclusion, helped by lots of Israeli and Jewish propaganda and the control they have over our media and the control they have over conservative media in particular. I mean, you have people like Douglas Murray saying that Western civilization, Douglas Murray and DeSantis over in Florida said, you know, Western civilization is Jerusalem and Athens. Yeah. I'm sorry. You can't just eliminate all the other peoples of Europe and replace them with Jerusalem. Yeah. We have so much more than that. Yep. It's a shame. And this is what I'm talking about, is that the Christian paradigm is causing Europeans now to lose sight of who they are and who they were. And then it annoys me because these people are trying to direct and guide and control opposition politics, opposition movements to globalism, opposition to mass migration, opposition to Islamification, and they're doing it in such a retarded way and from such a retarded starting point by tying our civilization in with Israel, this nation state created in the 1940s. Like, come on. They pick fights that we don't need to be picking, and ultimately will lose. There was an Irish. She's the wife of an Irish nationalist, and she tweeted out something over Easter. I think it was on Good Friday. She tweeted, "You know, the Jews killed Jesus," and it's just such a ridiculous claim to make, and it's such a ridiculous. Attack. I wouldn't even want to use the word attack, but if you're going to take on critique the Jewish question, that's such a dumb place to do it from. And then what happened is the European Union banned that post. You can't read that post in the European Union. So these people are playing into the hands of the Eurocrat censors and the ADL types who want to censor us and criminally punish us if they could. Legally punish us for the things we say, especially regarding Israel or Jews. And for what? So that you could make a really dumb comment that even theologically doesn't make sense, and the vast majority of Christians don't even care for. You know,
they know it and they don't care. They're like, yeah, they had to. That was God's plan. Yeah, we wouldn't be saved if they didn't reject Jesus. And to have that be your number one grievance is so discrediting. It makes everybody have sympathy and victimhood for Jews. It makes anti-Semites look insane and like religious, unhinged, like deranged psychopaths. That's how it plays out.
And because of it justifies censoring dissidents, identitarians, critics of Israel, critics of Jewish ideology or Jewish behavior. It just makes our work that much more difficult and dangerous. And again, what's the payoff? To say something that theologically really makes no sense. It's an own goal. Oh, the Jews killed Jesus. Of course they did, as they were prophesied to, as they had to in order for him to rise from the dead and be your savior.
Yeah, it was God's plan and God's prophecy that he preordained with foreknowledge had to happen. And it didn't happen. That's the other thing. This is Jewish myths. That's the That's the biggest thing. And have you noticed how they're trying to they are pushing the IRA definition of anti-Semitism worldwide? And the only pushback by any big influencers is, oh, they're trying to ban the Bible. They're not. They think it's. I mean, it's obviously anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish to blame all Jews today and say that they're cursed for killing God. Like, are you going to say that's pro-Jewish?
Well, that's another thing too. Is that the Jews killed Jesus? Okay, but they also founded the religion.
Check out this stream.
Yeah,
the Jews are using religion and the blacks and other colored folk to get rid of whitey and enslave the world.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead. Hold on, another one.
John Uridas sent $30. Love the work that Angelo is doing on Twitter, punching the Abrahamists and defending the European interests. It's awesome seeing that often your posts are going viral. Keep up the great work.
Yeah, you've been crushing. Thank you, John.
Yeah, and John is great. He makes those great clips. Yeah, I don't have much of I don't have a big following. I'm a pretty low profile guy, but occasionally the strangest things will go viral. I made a tweet. It was just about like how some South African scientists were like fighting each other, going crazy in some lab in Antarctica, and it got 6 million views.
I remember what you said. It was so. What did you say? I remember it was a funny one.
I just said they've ruined every continent now.
They've ruined every continent. Yeah, that's hilarious.
It's just a bit of banter. Come on. But it got 6 million. Funny number too, by the way. But yeah. So what was I saying? What were we talking about?
Talking about how stupid it is to say the Jews killed Jesus.
But they also like founded the church. Peter, who was a Jew, was the first pope.
Yeah.
Paul, who was a Jew, and in the Bible he says he's Jewish. He basically invented Christianity as we know it and spread it. So, I mean, the Jews killed Jesus, but then others didn't, and they followed him.
Yeah. And it also started as an exclusively Jewish movement that's worshiping the Jewish God and the Jewish Messiah. Like, you're going to leave that part out?
Christians in Rome, the early Christians were still so Jewish that they went to synagogue together. They just kind of like divided the synagogue between those who worship Jesus as the Moshiach and those who didn't. But they were still basically following all the other customs of the Jewish people in Rome. Right. Like but it just annoys me because that tweet gets taken down. That person is in nationalist and identitarian and anti-immigration spheres. So by association, I get roped into this stuff, or we're associated with each other, and I don't want anything to do with people who have like dumb takes like that end up being an own goal. Like you got censored. You brought the eye of Sauron upon you, and for what? What was the payoff?
Yeah,
Nothing.
They're failed talking points. We've had this Jews killed Jesus talking point for 2,000 years, and where are the Jews today?
Yeah, exactly.
How much longer are we going to keep doing? I have all of this argument summarized in this one meme. It's not that they killed Jesus in a mythical story and had to reject their Messiah to give you your Savior. It's that they invented Jesus. That should be the angle. And then this isn't the only one. It's they're not real Jews, or they don't follow the Torah, or it's the Talmud, but no criticism of the Torah ever, which is actually the whole Judeo conspiracy.
Exactly. Well, Candace Owens, for example, said, I would never criticize the Torah. The Torah is a fundamental part of my Bible. Well, there you go. That's what we're saying when you are in this matrix. They've got control over you. There are verses in the Torah that are being used to justify exactly what Israel's doing right now in Gaza. It's not in the Talmud. It's in the Torah. It's in your Bible. It's a huge tragedy that we know very little about who we were before Christianity. There are people who are trying to revive it, but it feels a bit hollow. It feels a bit forced. We still have to piece things together. And it's not so easy to actually, I don't know how people in the ancient
world. It feels a little bit insincere because it's like Christians really believe Jesus existed and was born a virgin and resurrected. They think it was all historical. None of it was. But it's like we don't really believe, Thor's the lightning god, but it's kind of just like revering them, honoring them, like that's the myths and legends of our people, and not like a Jewish story of a fake fabricated prophecy fulfilling Messiah that was meant to theologically conquer us. Like, do we want to worship our ancestors' gods or the gods of the Jews who wanted their God to conquer our gods? Like, it's an easy, simple question.
Yeah. One of the real epiphanies for me was going back to reading the Old Testament, and because when I was a kid, I don't understand things like different ethnicities or the genetic studies that have been done that show how we're all different peoples, and I had very little knowledge of these sort of things at 6 years old, 7 years old. But then, as a grown adult who's got a better grasp of these things, you go back to reading the Old Testament, and I just realized, I spent my childhood reading the founding mythologies and the stories of a completely foreign people. What are we doing? This is so tragic. And I was lucky enough, though, that I did have, my parents did allow me to explore I've always loved history, so they did allow me to explore other things, and they nurtured my curiosity about Roman history and medieval history, and like I said earlier, Irish history. So I was able to just of my own volition immerse myself in the history of my people, which is what inspired me to move back to the fatherland in the first place. But there's a lot of Christians who don't do that, and to the extent that they do, I've had Christians, not bots, real people, tell me that their own ancestors, the Anglos, the Celts, the Gaels, were running around in the mud chasing pigs and had no civilization, no sense of right and wrong if it wasn't, and they didn't have it until they became Christians. So to the extent that they even are learning about their own people's history, their own ancestors, it's in order to denigrate them. There are very few people in the world that do this. Only Western Christians do this, really, I would say. And that cannot be good for the spiritual health of a people.
They get more worked up at pagans, at least internet Christians, get more worked up at pagans than they do their kosher churches and their multicultural mass immigration pope.
That's a very online phenomenon, but it's also, I think, a very Protestant phenomenon. Like go to Rome, the seat of the Vatican. It's the epicenter of Catholicism. But you would never get an Italian, a modern day Italian, to say, oh, we should topple all the statues of Minerva and Mars, in the museums and lighting the streets and stuff. Oh, that ancient temple to Minerva, we should tear that down. That's heathenism. Of course not. These are part of our story as well as people, and some of us prefer to go back to that or prefer to maintain that and step over the Christian stuff. That really riles up the monotheists, though, and it always has. I mean, you can go back thousands of years. They were the original Christians were the ones tearing down the statues and burning down the temples and everything. There's I don't know if you ever saw this. It was, I think, a year ago or 2 years ago. Someone in Israel, actually, I think, pushed over a statue to Athena that was in display in some museum in, I think, Tel Aviv, and pushed it over. The head came off. He completely vandalized the statue, and he said that he tore it down because it was in violation of the Torah. So who knows if that was a Christian who did it or a Jew? But isn't it interesting how both would do that?
Yeah, I've got clips of rabbis and Christians celebrating the same thing. Have you read Darkening Age as well? I bet you have. Yeah. It's so infuriating
also,
what they've done.
The next one I want to read is The Final Pagan Generation. That's another one. That's a good one. I hope it's on my list. I got to read that one next.
I have a rabbi clip of a rabbi over in Greece pointing to the temple and say, like, paganism was destroyed through Islam, which was Jewish, so it fulfilled their thing. And Gnostic Informant is over in Greece right now. He's going to do an interview with the pagan guy that built the Temple of Zeus and the Greek Orthodox Church tried to get him arrested, did get him arrested, and tried to block him from just building like a little temple in the guy's yard.
Yeah, I think it was a temple to Pan, and it might have been to Zeus as well. I'm not quite sure, but yeah, I remember following that story, and I was really holding out hope that he would overcome the attempts to shut him down. It seems like he did, so that's good.
U.S. tourists arrested for smashing Roman-era statues.
Yeah. So my assumption is that it was probably an American Christian who's a Zionist, an evangelical, who was on a trip to the Holy Land, and he got upset at the sight of these pagan, demonic statues that are statues to my ancestors' gods, and he pushed them over, he vandalized it because it violates the Torah, which is Jewish mythology and Jewish history.
What a good Noahide. Destroying the idols. What a good Noahide. How about this one? You mentioned this earlier.
What do you think? Imagine if Noahidism becomes normalized. Imagine if this trend keeps going. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe like 50 years from now, 100 years from now, you would have maniacal Christians and now because of mass migration, it would be all sorts of different races too. Storming through the streets of Rome or some European city, storming into the museums to smash statues of Jupiter.
Well, the Muslims have been doing it quite a bit recently too.
Oh yeah. History would be repeating.
Yeah. They'll take down Buddhist or Hindu statues as well, or Christian stuff or pagan stuff. Like that, they are acting as Noahides in the name of the God of Abraham, destroying the idols. You mentioned this earlier, and it's a perfect clip. Check out Jones here. This is what's wrong with the Christians. This type of narrative.
And we are here promoting a Americana Renaissance Christian revolution to be Christ-like. The most successful settlements in Africa are where blacks have adopted Christianity. Incredibly so. You go to Africa, you get black people to become Christian and actually follow it, they're just as successful as European. Europeans were living in caves and huts and killing each other till they got Christianity, just like Africans. We acted just like Africans today. You can go, look at those savages. Well, we were, till we got Jesus.
All the biggest Zionist shills promoting Jesus, by the way, and saying that's like worse than E. Michael Jones.
Wow, that had everything, every bad take you could possibly imagine on this issue. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, it's just, again, if Christianity is this great civilization, and when they say civilization, we just mean like technological advances, 2-story and above buildings, and a sense of like medicine and technology and philosophy. Okay, well, pre-Christian Europeans had all those things. And there are highly Christianized African countries today that still don't have those things. So Christianity isn't this like magic key that just opens the door. There are some things about Christian doctrine that can assist civilization. It can, turning their cheek instead of an eye for an eye can be useful for creating a peaceful society where people aren't just running around killing everyone who's ever insulted them or done them a wrong. But then if you take that too far, then you're just cucking to your enemies. So I mean, there's all sorts of nuance here. To just say without Christianity we'd be savages, we'd be just like the Africans who still don't know how to irrigate. I just don't know. I don't think so.
He's trying to outdo E. Michael Jones, who said Germans were chasing pigs in the forest. It's like, so we were hunting bacon. Okay, that's based and awesome. That's how we survived. That's who we are. How about this one too? It's like, they want us to ally with the Christians to like save the West and then work out our religious differences later. But then this is the type of thing that the even supposed based Orthodox Christians are saying. Did you hear this one?
He said you got to quit worrying about saving the empire, saving the West, saving America. He's like, empires come and go, and the church has been here throughout time.
Right.
And so don't be so concerned with how to politically save this country, because it's not going to happen.
Right.
He said you got to quit worrying.
What do you think of that type of mentality?
Well, like that's what I was saying earlier, is that I don't want to take people's faith from them, because it does give them a sense of grounding. It does give them something to strive for, to live for, to defend. And in a sense, I do agree in that I don't really think we should be eager to shed our sweat or our blood for institutions like governments, nation states that have really betrayed us. So, in the sense of like fighting and dying for America or the European Union, I understand actually that point of view. It's like, no, these things come and go. These are temporary. And right now, I don't think they deserve our devotion or our sacrifice. But
what about Italy? Just like the state of Italy.
My concern is the people. I would fight for my people.
As what sent $10 on Rumble. The gods are the powers that constitute the qualities of the universe and form the basis for the laws of nature. There is nothing insincere about it.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's just different because you don't believe that they're actually real, so it's not as strong as a belief. That's the point I was trying to make. Sorry, Angelo, continue.
No, it's just I care about us existing as a people. Italy as a united nation state wasn't created until the mid-19th century, but Italians as a people have existed for a really long time, and I don't want them to go extinct. I don't want the Irish to go extinct. Ireland as an independent country has only existed for like a blip in time as the modern independent country that we know of it today with a flag and everything. But the Irish people are like 3,000 years old. I don't want them to go extinct. And like that comment, though, can be also said about the church. The Catholic Church, yeah, it's been here. It'll never go. Empires come and go, but the church is still here.
Yeah. How about the church comes and goes?
Well, the church can come and go, too. It's gone through several changes. And right now, in its current iteration, especially after the reign of Pope Francis, I would say it's not worth defending either as an institution. Now, if you want to talk about your faith, that's another thing. But don't come at me and say that we need to fight for the Catholic Church. Come on. And going back to my Substack, if I can shill it for just a moment, I did write something on this. It was called on the Christian sideshow of nationalism, or something like that, because there has been this trend over the past couple of years, and Nick Fuentes was a part of its nascence. This shift from like identitarianism and nationalism as the tools we use to fight globalism and anti-whiteism, mass immigration, things like that. And there's been this shift to now, no, we need to all become Christians, or like in Nick Fuentes' case, specifically Catholics. That's the thing that the Grapers all want to be. Everyone has to be Catholic. And we're going to have this big Christian revival. And that's how we'll take on the Jewish influence. And now I don't even think they care much about mass immigration or identitarian issues, because that whole movement has become a very big tent, and it's full of lots of diverse peoples now. But what unites them is that they're Catholics. Well, I'm sorry, but that's the last thing we need, actually. Like, that's just globalism with prettier interior decorations.
And Jewish, and worshiping a Jewish God, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I really get annoyed when I see, again, people come into this, it barely can be called a movement, but let's use that word. And then they start bringing all their baggage with them, or different objectives, different copes even, instead of just being focused on what's really at stake here. We want to exist as a people, okay? People talk about Western values, British values, American values. Like, British values are very different today than they were 100, 200 years ago. Values change. What's important is that there are still British people. What's important is that you can go to England and still hang out with English people. And then if you want to go somewhere, and then if you go to Japan, you can see Japanese people. And that's real diversity. Not this insane experiment that we've been doing for the past 2 decades, or perhaps even longer, of mashing everyone together and calling that diversity. And that happens at the expense of really genociding the native populations. It's a genocide but it's just without bombs and bullets. But you are still reducing the number of native peoples. You're making it impossible for them to live according to their customs and their ways. Their fertility rates are going down. They're white flighting to all these decreasingly available areas where they can go and still live as they please with, you know, their fellow kin. So that meets all the definitions that that the United Nations defined as a genocide. Definitions that, by the way, were created by a Jew. His name was Raphael. What was his surname? But he listed the like 5 or 6 requisites that you have to meet for a genocide. And if you apply them to what's going on in Europe or even the United States and Canada, it's a genocide. And that's why people use the term white genocide. And it is perhaps an eye-catching or exaggerated term that gets people's attention. But when you actually think about it and apply the definition of genocide to it, it fits. It really does fit. And Christianity and uniting and making everyone become Catholic is not going to be the solution to this. It's just going to be the continuation of it. But hey, at least we have a nice cathedral to go to.
And you know, E. Michael Jones has been very clear about that. Most base Catholic, E. Michael Jones, says that it's not compatible. It's not white nationalism or European nationalism is not compatible with Catholicism. And I saw Fuentes on a clip the other day basically say the same thing in response to Jared Taylor criticizing the Pope. And now they're all advocating to have this a black Pope. You say, so it begins. What's the take on the black Pope?
Well, I mean, in a way, they are right, but that's the problem. That's the problem, is that...
Tales of the Levant sent $10. The green-pilled movement is the most logically grounded community out there. No kosher disinfo goy slop. Thank you, Adam, and all the supporters that drive this movement.
Yeah, no kosher goy slop, exactly. That's why Pox Populi is here. Keep going. Thank you. Thanks a lot, buddy.
Well, I was just going to say, E. Michael Jones, as much as I consider him a bit of a buffoon, and Nick Fuentes, who I don't really like at all, they're right, though. They are being consistent here. Yeah. And this is where Catholicism and Christianity as a whole, you know, taking into account all its different variations, this is where it's going. The number of white Christians in America is decreasing. Obviously, the number of Native Europeans who consider themselves Christians has been going down. I think it's even going down very slowly in Latin America, and I always suspected that they chose the Argentine Pope Francis back when they did it as an attempt to bolster Catholicism in South America by choosing a South American. But the only place where Catholicism is really growing, where Christianity is really growing, is Africa. And if this is what matters most to you, is maintaining the Catholic Church, maintaining the Catholic faith or the Christian religion, if that's what's most important to you, then of course, eventually people like E. Michael Jones and Nick Fuentes will support an African Pope. They will support immigration as long as the migrants convert to Catholicism, or as long as the migrants coming in are from Christian countries, which would still basically mean nothing changes. So I just think when I say like, so it begins, I'm just saying, okay, yeah, this is the inevitable point where the e-Crusaders drop all pretenses of caring about identitarianism or their people, and it just becomes a universalist,
Jesus first, Rabbi
Jesus
Yeshua
first, Catholic Church first movement. And at that point, you know, I really don't want anything to do with these people, and I really wish that they would just, you know, piss off, because they're not doing my side any favors, and in fact, they often cause many more problems. Yeah,
Christianity, a true Christian is the blood of Jesus first, not the blood of his people first. And if they're not, if they say they're not, then they're not real Christians. Might as well just drop Christianity. You're going to be disavowed and kicked out of your churches and censured as not real Christians anyway.
Yeah, like obviously, E. Michael Jones is probably more sincere in his faith. Nick Fuentes is just kind of, you know, vulgar, and the gripers rather vulgar, and they would be definitely frowned upon if they said any of what they say online in real life in their churches. Absolutely. They'd be kicked out of their churches. But there are Christians who are genuine believers in this. Again, referencing that thing that I wrote about the Christian sideshow taking over nationalism, I referenced a Spanish journalist. His name is Javier Villamor. He's, again, I would say he's one of the good ones. He cares about Spain. He cares about Spanish nationalism. He's very aware of mass migration and how really, let's use the correct terms here, it's an invasion. It's a controlled invasion. People in his own government are opening the doors for it to happen. It's having all sorts of terrible effects, as it always does. He knows all these things. He's very good on these issues, but he's also a devout Catholic, and you can tell that that's ultimately always going to be the most important thing for him. And he wrote about an experience he had where he had gone to Brussels for some journalistic work, and one day he pops inside of a cathedral, inside of a church. And inside, partaking in the Mass are majority Africans, majority foreigners. There's very few, native Europeans in this church. He was one of the only ones. And he writes about how he looked at them all smiling and participating in the Mass and embracing each other. And he says that he had this epiphany where he realized, okay, we can make the multiracial society work. We can make this new Europe that's been created with all these foreign peoples now swamping our countries. We can make it work if we unite under the cross. Mm-hmm. And I just wrote about how, okay, with all due respect, and I completely believe that you're sincere in that you really think that, but with all due respect, that's just continuing our death by 1,000 cuts. Mm-hmm. And it's, like I said earlier, it's just globalism, but with really nice interior decoration. Oh, look how pretty the church is, and look how nice the people are smiling in their pews. But we're still being wiped out.
Christianity is Judaism for the Gentiles. It's global, one world religion, messianic Judaism. That's what it is. It's Jewish globalism. That's what Christianity is.
This is the main reason why I was able to finally step over Christianity. It was because of the COVID years, and a lot of your live streams helped me see this, because of the stuff you were showing and you were getting to. And I was seeing this all over the internet. I was seeing it with real people, family members in real life. We were all stuck in lockdown. We had nothing to do but spend time on the internet and try and figure out what the hell was going on. There were lots of conspiracy theories everywhere, and there was lots of conspiracies saying, this is part of the globalist agenda. This is part of the one world government, one world order. But it was coming from these, Christian accounts, evangelical people, and they were citing Bible verses. It's prophesied in the book of whatever, and they were showing, look how the symbol.
$5 Amazon Video just released a movie Conclave. A day after the Pope died, the script was like a direct mirror of the current situation with the Pope, even considering a black African Pope.
Thank you, Zornder Edom. Sorry, Angelo, go on. I'm trying to find out how to pause these so we can just play them at the end and it doesn't keep interrupting you, but
no, it's fine. And if you want to address any of the stuff that they say, it's how you're in the flow and cooking, and then it messes up, especially if people are trying to clip it too. I got to figure out how to get these paused and then just play them when we're ready. So sorry, keep going. Well, I would just notice some really silly things like these diehard believers, evangelical types would be saying, well, look how the symbol of the World Health Organization or the symbol of pharmacies is the staff with the snake around it. That's demonic. Or, there was one where they took apart the letters that spelled out Pfizer and they rearranged them so that they spelled Lucifer. And, their heart was in the right place because, hey, if this is what helped them avoid taking the vaccine, fair enough. But again, it's like,
a Christian favorite pastime of Christians is like Satan hunting or Satan finding, right? Demon hunters.
Everything is demonic. Everything is like it takes a lot of creativity to pull apart the letters that spell Pfizer and make them spell Lucifer. You really have to be looking hard for that. But
and like Alex Jones will always be like, oh, the satanic Luciferian globalist New World Order is going to take over the world. It's fulfillment of prophecy. Biblical prophecy is coming true. You all got to believe in Yeshua. You all got to worship Jesus. Jesus is the answer. So in the name of fighting the satanic globalist one world religion, which is fulfillment of Jesus prophecy, they're actually ushering in global Judaism under the name of Jesus.
And Lucifer wasn't even equated with the fallen angel or Satan until the 4th century. Yeah. Which is a relatively long time to wait before associating this main character really now with the devil. There was
but it's associated with Jesus. Lucifer, the angel, is associated with Jesus, the morning star. Yeah.
Exactly. He's the light bearer. It's weird inversion. And this is, again, not to get off topic, but there's such a long history of the more we became in contact with this Judeaic offshoot, the more symbols and figures became inverted. Like the pentagram wasn't an evil symbol either until serious inversion, or the swastika, for example, although that is inverted for other reasons, but just another example. But anyway, as I was observing all of this, I came to the realization that these Christians' eschatology is no different really than globalism, than what the evil satanic globalist pedophiles want. It's a one world religion.
Every knee will bow. Every knee will bow.
And it's not even a one world religion where you might think, oh, I'm an atheist, or what can they ever do to me, or whatever. I don't, religion, who cares? But then it's also temporal. It's also earthly. They want a one world government in Jerusalem that decides everything for the entire world. How is that different than complaining about Brussels and the EU or the deep state in Washington, D.C.? What's the difference?
Or the Moshiach, or Chabad's Moshiach. You can't criticize their whole conspiracy of wanting the world to all worship their God and their Messiah when Christians also want the whole world to worship that God and a Messiah.
Mm-hmm. And then you compare that with how we used to be before monotheistic zealotry took over our minds. And what you find is a very long history of pre-Christian peoples, whether it's the European peoples or in Persia or elsewhere, pretty much like just being fine with whatever gods other people are worshiping. It's very rare that you would have these wars of religion. Like, Julius Caesar killed a bunch of Gauls, for example, but he didn't kill them because they refused to worship Jupiter. And there's also a history of all of these different polytheistic peoples kind of it's very curious. I would have very much liked to understand their thinking and how they were able to do this, but incorporating each other's gods. Mm-hmm. Obviously the Greeks had a huge influence on the Romans, but then this is kind of getting into the idea of synchronism, but you see all these similarities in several Indo-European pre-Christian religions. They have similar figures with similar origins and similar metaphorical meanings and all this stuff. And so it was very easy for them to just sort of interchange or adopt or take on, different ideas. Whereas with monotheism, it's, we will crush you, we will kill you if you don't forsake everything you believe and take our beliefs.
Worship the King of the Jews and the God of the Jews, or you're a satanic, demonic antichrist going to hell, and we will destroy you, basically.
Right.
That's the
and
attitude.
So how is this different, really, than modern politics? Be a liberal democracy, or we will bomb you. Have transgenderism and feminism in your country, or we will invade and we'll bomb you. And we're going to have a one world government, but it's going to be based in Christ-pilled in Jerusalem. Well, I'm sorry, I doubt that, actually. And I think a one world government of any sort would be terrible. Mm-hmm. So
nowhere to run.
Exactly. So Alex Jones, what do you really stand for? you've made a name for yourself opposing the globalists and deep state agenda and all this stuff. But what really separates your final objective, your dream, way of having things, and the globalists?
I have an answer for you. You ready for the answer? It's from Alex Jones himself.
And how are you going to get a Messiah that fixes everything if everybody doesn't go under it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the Messiah comes, everybody's got to follow it.
Wow.
Everybody has to. And so
all the Goyim got to worship Yahweh, the God of Israel, and Rabbi Yeshua HaMashiach, the King of the Jews, okay? How else are we going to fix everything?
So childish.
Trust the
How
plan.
You have a Messiah who fixes everything.
Yeah.
That's
I have him going.
That's Marvel Comics as a religion.
Yeah.
We gotta have a superhero that comes down and fixes everything in 2.5 hours of pure entertainment.
He even says, well, we're not trusting the QAnon plan. The Bible's the plan. We're trusting the Bible plan. You mean the Jewish Bible that they wrote and then wanted
Also,
you to believe in?
that. This is another thing that really helped me see things. Be careful with that, because who's the Bible really for? And so if you're looking to the Bible and you see that as this wonderful, foreshadowing, the script is written and everything turns out good in the end, well, who are the good guys and bad guys in that final battle? You might not be the side that you think you are. You might not be the side that wins and is the good guys in the end, because you're not reading that from the correct perspective, which is the perspective of the people who that was written by and for.
Yeah. They're the authors, the originators, the ones with the secrets, the chosen people, and they have the upper hand. And you still think, oh, Christian, there's nothing they fear more than us believing in their prophecies and their God and hating them for stupid reasons and not the right reasons.
It's kind of a terrifying thought, actually, that so many people could have made such a grave error of understanding to the point where they think that they're the ones that are going to be victorious and glorified, when actually they're the ones that are prophesied to be annihilated in this hellscape. That's chilling, because a lot of history and a lot of interpretation of myth and symbolism is often a case of like Chinese whispers. It's like a game of telephone. There's so much gets lost through the generations and through the centuries. And so it's sometimes difficult to know what is a true account of a historical event, or what is the true meaning of this symbol or this mystery school. And so it's actually very easy to make false conclusions, to come to false conclusions. But so then you ask yourself, how many fundamental institutions and fundamental beliefs might be based on false conclusions, on erroneous conclusions? And that one, the idea that we come out on top in the end, that the Messiah saves us and not some other people completely different, and we're actually the ones that get annihilated, that's got to be one of the biggest errors of interpretation or understanding.
I got a short clip, 40 seconds. I want to play for you of this rabbi that I think all the e-crusaders out there really need to see, and everybody needs to see. It kind of gives away what Christianity is.
You have Greece. What the Greeks did is they tried to wipe out the Jewish faith. They tried to replace the biblical faith with Greek faith, Zeus and all. So what did God do? He replaced the Greek faith with the biblical faith. The Greeks ended up converting to Christianity and accepted the God of Israel, and the Greek gods were gone. And actually, he used the Greek language and the Greek culture to spread the gospel. Rome took Israel and
he used the Gentiles to infected the Gentiles with the mind virus and got them to start feeding and eating themselves and spreading it everywhere. That's what actually happened.
They shattered it. They spread the Jewish people all across the world, shattered it. What did God do with Rome? He ended up, Rome fell, and the pieces of Rome have been scattered all over the world.
There's one. Now here's one more.
Now, the Romans burnt the temple, the Jewish temple, to the ground. And many historians say that they won the battle, but they lost the war. Because, they burnt the temple down, and the Jews were exiled, and that was the end of the Second Temple. However, a couple hundred years later, and you see that this whole Christianity thing pops up, and what that basically means is that hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands, eventually millions and millions of people throughout the world are learning the Bible and praying to a Jewish Messiah. That's almost as Jewish as you can get, besides not being Jewish. So
Wow.
They always say, the meme online, remember, is there's nothing more Jewish than rejecting Jesus. Now here's the reality.
That's almost as Jewish as you can get, besides not being Jewish. So
How does that make you feel hearing that?
It's actually not true, because the Messiah was meant to conquer, subjugate the Gentiles, according to the prophecies as well. So it's not only Jewish to believe in the Jewish Messiah. So I don't completely agree, actually. But yeah, let's finish it, and then I want to get your thoughts. 30 seconds.
To a Jewish Messiah. That's almost as Jewish as you can get, besides not being Jewish. So the ideologically, they won. Now, I look at Christianity and Islam like the younger brothers of Judaism. They kind of run after the older brother. They think they know what they're doing. They're kind of copying him, but they don't really understand anything they're doing. And let's say the older brother is like 20 years old, and they're like 2 and 3. So that's like the comparison. Like, do not kill and do not steal, which are like the basic principles of Judaism, are still very, very hard for the Muslims and the Christians to wrap their head around.
Yeah, Jews never steal or kill.
Whoa.
Sure. That's crazy.
Wow. Man, see, everything is projection. You want to talk about like real supremacy, real supremacist beliefs. Jewish supremacy has no competition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's so funny.
But look how my people, or at least, my father's side, are painted as the villains. Rome tried to destroy the Jews, tried to destroy Judaism. They never tell you why, by the way. They never tell you why Hadrian had to go into Judea with the legions, and they never tell you about the revolt that the Jews were carrying out. And they were just, randomly killing every Roman in the street that they possibly could. And that's why Rome had to send in the legions and lay down the law. No, it's just...
they did have them occupied and were taxing them and stuff, right? So it's like...
Well, yeah, I mean, right. It was an empire, and they had vassals that occasionally got fed up with being a subject of the empire. It happened all the time.
Yeah.
But no one else has like a 2,000-year-old grudge and uses that as justification to now wipe you out culturally and even genetically, if they could, and they're trying to, like 2,000 years later. And then no one else like adopted their religion that paints themselves as the bad guy. That's the weirdest thing.
I have a 2,000-year-old, or maybe a 1,000-year-old for my people, grudge against Jews for creating Christianity. So I kind of sympathize. I hold a grudge. Here's one more on this idea.
Rome conquered Jerusalem with weapons, earthly weapons, but now Jerusalem's going to conquer Rome with spiritual weapons.
Christianity was the spiritual weapon.
It's funny too, is whenever you show these clips, and I've got many of them saved as well, and I've shown them to people, but you'll get these responses saying, why do you believe what rabbis say? And I just think that's one of the worst responses. Like, you read the Torah, you read the Bible.
Yeah, you believe rabbis and Jews when they say Jesus was born a virgin and walked on water and was raised from the dead.
Right. And then also, who wouldn't know more about this than rabbis? And especially in clips where who are they really talking to? I imagine that in a lot of these clips, they're just talking to fellow Jews. They're in their synagogues or whatever. I think they might be becoming aware of the fact that people like you are compiling them and showing them to Gentiles. But I don't think the intent of these rabbis saying these things on camera or in their synagogues to their congregation is to get this message to Christians and make them doubt their faith. No, they're saying what they actually believe and what they believe to be the history of Judaism and its relationship with Christianity, and they're telling it to their fellow Jews.
And a lot of these clips come from old videos before people were clipping them up and they were going viral online. These are old stuff that they never thought the Goyim were ever going to look at. And when the topic is like, what do Jews believe about Christianity? What do they think about Christianity? Who else am I going to cite when that's what we're talking? And I'll show National Socialists saying the same ideas. I'll show Christians, every denomination saying the same ideas, and then it's just the facts, and I could prove it, and it's what I know. And then they go, "You believe the rabbis?" It's the dumbest cope and response ever.
No, honestly, some of the behavior of these e-crusaders, and maybe some of them are just anons with nothing. You can't take them seriously, but then there's actual people who have a public persona, they have a real name, and they're coming out with these copes. And I just observed that for such a long time, and I just realized, they don't have an argument. And it was another reason for me to just let it go and step over it.
Well, let's see here. What do I have next? This is another question. And we're going to close. I know I told you an hour and a half. Could we go another 15? Are you cool for that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I do want to also mention the John's question about like my take on MAGA and the Americans. I do want to get to that.
Well, let's do that right now, and then we'll wrap up with just a couple things. So let's get the that was Henrik's question, right? About the American question.
I don't remember. Okay. But yeah, it was just about like how, like, one of the examples that came in that question was Trump said the EU was specifically created to take advantage of the United States. So I don't know what happened, but basically the very day after Trump's inauguration, he and his whole administration and the entire MAGA cult just went mask off with this real hatred and venom towards Europe, and Europe as an entity, the European Union as an institution, and the European peoples as a people, the European nations. Now, I've written about this on a few occasions. I've observed this for several years, and like I said, I've split my entire life in both of the places. So I know that there is a very real feeling of resentment and like dislike that lots of Americans, especially the non-white Americans, have towards Europeans. And of course, there's the stereotype of the rude French waiter and the French snob or things like that. And so I wasn't quite as surprised as some other people who were truly expressing shock at, like, where is this coming from? Why are the Americans so pissed off at us and so, hateful towards us? But I've been observing it for a long time, so I wasn't quite as surprised. But it was almost like the Trump administration gave permission to a lot of Americans to start expressing this more openly. And it's, I think, very frustrating for people on my side of things, because now, like, it's bad enough that we get attacked from the left, from liberals, from globalists, but now we're seeing this anti-European sentiment coming from a so-called right-wing sphere. And if your hope was that, we could have a right-wing European nationalist alliance with ascendant Trump administration, we can take on globalism. Well, if the Trump administration is now crapping on you every day, calling you a bad ally, threatening to annex your territory, and then all the while, the MAGA tards are like cheering it on. And it's just completely wrong, because the United States actually set up the European Union. They were incredibly involved in setting up the European Union. A lot of Europeans didn't even want it. The Americans set it up as a bulwark against the Soviet Union. And then this other thing too that's been going on is that, Europeans have been leeching off of American protection, and we protect them while they get to have, free healthcare and just other ridiculous things. But again, that's something that the United States set up itself. There was a leaked Pentagon document from 1992 in which the deep state says, here's the steps we're going to have in order to maintain global hegemony in perpetuity. And one of the things we need to do, and they specifically say, one of the things we need to do is make sure that the Europeans do not develop their own security, their own defense systems. We want Europe to be dependent on us, our vassal. And so now here comes a new administration, and it's like they're guilt tripping us, people in Europe, European governments, for doing exactly the things that the United States has been wanting them to do for decades. But now all of a sudden we're bad allies, and we're cucks, and we're leeches. Another thing too that often happens is that whenever there is like a terrorist attack, like a Syrian drives his car through a German Christmas market, or a British boy gets stabbed by an African or something, there's always this American reaction on social media of like Americans saying they deserved it. That's what you get for voting for socialists, or that's what you get for not having the Second Amendment. And it's just very disturbing, because you never see it going the other way. You know, there was that American white boy that got stabbed recently at that track race. And I just think I would be completely surprised if some European was in the replies saying, "Oh, served him right. That's what you get, you cucks. You know, that's what you get for listening to rap music or going to school with blacks or something." I don't know. It would never happen. But if it happens in a European country, you get all these Americans saying, "Oh, Germany's finished. Sweden is cooked. France has fallen." So there's all this demoralization going on, but it's coming from a country where all of this has already happened. Like I was saying earlier, all of the bad stuff, the demographic shifts, the violence, it already happened to you. And here you are trying to like lord it over, or beat your chest and insult people who are now going through the same things. And so that's what I mean when I talk about the American question, because I really now becoming quite convinced that we're not on the same side. We have divergent interests, and whether it's intentional or not, on the part of Trump, I do think that the United States and European countries going their own way and pursuing their own destinies and interests would probably be a good thing, particularly if just in real world politics, what the United States wants is to continue keeping European countries as vassal states, like we've been for 80 years, ever since the end of the Second World War. That cannot be the fate for European countries. We deserve much better than that. And so if we have to get the American boot off our necks, so to speak, yeah, that might cause some friction and some bad blood, because everyone wants what's good for their country. At the end of the day, they want where they live to be successful. And of course, white people want to create a sense of solidarity. But I think just in day-to-day, actual real-life politics, I think it might be a good idea that we start seeing ourselves as having different interests, and we try and pursue them as best we can, with no hard feelings. But I think that the Trump administration is showing that that's where things are going to go.
It'll be interesting to see how the relationship plays out. Trump was just meeting with the leader of Norway today as well. I wonder how that will go.
It's a strange thing, because you have countries like Italy that are inextricably tied to American interests and have been for a long time. So Italy will probably never be able to really be fully independent of the American empire, as it were. But then you have other countries, like they have nukes. They have glorious histories, and they should have a glorious future. But Trump's been doing some really weird things.
He seems cool with Macron, right? Trump seems cool with Macron. He isn't trashing him too much.
I don't know.
They looked like they were bros at the meeting that I saw.
Well, there was that moment where Macron had to interrupt and correct Trump about, again, the misconceptions about European investment into the war in Ukraine. There's all these Americans who think that the European Union hasn't been investing in the Ukraine war, which, again, can kind of be argued that the United States helped cause. So it's like the complaints are really strange and not based on much fact. And then there was another weird thing where Trump, he and Vance have been goading Denmark. They've been taunting Denmark, and now even actually like threatening Denmark that we're going to take Greenland one way or another, whether through economic or, if we have to, military options. Like, this is just insane. Denmark is an ally and a very good one, always has been. But then, as egg prices in the United States are still very high, Trump's administration went to the Danes and asked them for eggs. It's like, what is this type of diplomacy where you insult?
Give us eggs or we're taking Greenland.
Yeah, it's like,
I was just thinking, like, we always talk about
threatening us to annex our territory, and you've been saying all these bad things about us, but now you also want us to donate our eggs to you. Like, this isn't how diplomacy amongst allies is conducted. So I have no idea what the main objectives here are, but it's just very strange to see. But again, on social media, on Twitter, whenever Trump or Vance made these comments about annexing Greenland, you'd get all these magaloids in the replies like, yeah, what are those Danish cucks going to do about it anyway? They can't do anything, like America, like that kind of mentality. And it's just really, really bizarre, kind of gross to see. And so I just started quote tweeting, responding, and highlighting all of this, what I believe is a genuine American sentiment of resentment and hatred towards European countries, because often, like, I've kind of been roped into the white nationalist sphere, which I don't even really consider myself one. I don't think white is a very authentic identity. I think it really only works in the American context. I care about Italian identity, Irish identity, French identity, and that's much deeper than just white. But in any sense, a lot of the white nationalist scene is built around, white racial consciousness, white solidarity. We're all in this together. And then when I see that what really seems to be happening is these white nationalists want nationalism for America, but not for you. Like, nationalism for me, but not for thee. My country, America, still has to be the great big power. I want to continue enjoying being this superpower. And if you don't like it, well, you're just a cuck and you can't do anything about it anyway. So where's your sense of solidarity now? I think it was kind of a false friendship for some of these people at the end of the day.
I'm sure there's that going on online, but most of what I've seen and people that I pay attention to are trying to save Europe and don't want to see all the mass migration and, the fall of Western civilization in Europe. And I was thinking a second ago, like, all this talk in America about how Israel's our greatest ally. Like, Israel should not be our greatest ally. It should be European countries.
Oh, another really, again, it's just a tragedy how we've come to this point. Another common take I was seeing from people who have like Donald Trump as their profile picture and, MAGA this and MAGA that. Common talking point was like, basically, F them Europeans. Israel's our greatest ally. We should be forming more ties with Israel, because like there might be someone in the reply saying, why are you slagging off Denmark, but you have the Israeli flag in your bio? And the reply would be, because Israel's an actual ally. Israel's a genuine ally. These European cucks aren't. And just the fact that we've got to that point is tragic. And I do agree that there are, again, real public-facing Americans who are, they do have interests. They do have the best interests of the European peoples, the European nations in mind as well. People like Jared Taylor, I'm sure yourself would be one of them. Kevin Deanna, the editor-in-chief at Countercurrents, Greg Johnson, would be another one. So they definitely exist. I just think that it's a very small minority, unfortunately, and it is unfortunate. And I also think that, again, kind of like what I said earlier, with real politics, if you really take this into the practical world of politics, I do think that at the end of the day, a Frenchman wants France to do as well as possible, and an American wants America to do as well as possible, and an Englishman wants England to do as well as possible. And if the interests of these different places start to diverge or even clash, then I just think it's it's normal that people will take the interest of where they live and, that stronger identity rather than this sort of vague, oh, but we're all white, so we need to find a way to, make our divergent interests converge again. Well, sometimes that's not going to happen. And we see this even in the context of Europe. This is one of the big problems of the European Union, is that, the interests of France and Germany and Italy and Spain aren't always the same. And if France is the big dog and Germany is the big dog and they get to decide everything, in some cases unilaterally, well, that creates a lot of resentment amongst the other countries that didn't get a say in that. And then the big countries like France or Germany, they get resentful when some little country like, Slovenia says, actually, I object to, for example, European rearmament. And this can happen. All of the European Union is deciding, okay, we want to rearm or we want to pursue this objective. And then one country objects. Okay, well, now we have to argue about it for 5 years. Nothing gets done because, some small country had a disagreement. So, of course, that creates resentment amongst the bigger countries that think they should have more say. So for me, the solution has always been to go back to the way things were when you had lots of different nation states that were free to pursue their own destinies and pursue their own interests and have competition, not war or bloodshed or animosity, but healthy competition. That's how we got the Renaissance. That's how we got great developments in art and technology and thinking. Innovation was because of this. If it's all kind of, compressed under the auspices of one major superpower or this sort of globalist entity like the European Union or the Washington deep state, then we see what happens. We become actually stagnant. We don't go anywhere.
I wonder if because there's an anti-West agenda that they could be perhaps trying to create a wedge between America and Europe and turn them against each other. Do you think the problem is that you want to have independent states and autonomy, but don't you think it'd be cool to have Europe and America and the West aligned and united on certain levels?
On certain levels, absolutely. I think so. Obviously, we can all, especially if you're in a Western European country, relate with Americans in immigration issues, identity, things like that. And then, I'm sure that, I would say it would just be an alliance. There used to be a thing called alliances. You didn't have to have an imperial force and vassals or these global institutions like the World Health Organization or the United Nations, etc. You could just have alliances where
don't you think they should have Europe should have a united army though? You don't want Europe having all their own armies and fighting with one another. I like to have all Europeans and all of the West united militarily.
I think it depends on what that army would be used for. You know what I mean?
Defense.
Yeah. I think Europe should have a much more united foreign policy, definitely. But I think that history shows that multilingual, multicultural, imperial armies tend to dysfunction in the long run. And it's better to have armies that are comprised of people who really have a shared identity, shared language. And I assume that to have a European army, you would have to have one unified language, which I think would, again, just be more of the damaging effects of globalization, and globalism, one of which is the eradication of languages.
Yeah. You should all speak English.
Yeah, see, that's
which you kind of already do. That is kind of like the world language.
Especially American English, because it's spread through pop culture and media.
You betcha.
So I think a united foreign policy and then alliances. People forget that Europe used to have the Triple Alliance, the Triple Entente, the Axis, the Allies. I think everyone has lost their imagination these days, where we all think that everything has to be under the auspices of some, unifying, globe-spanning institution. And
Jesus is the king of all the white people. I saw that in the chat a second ago. That's kind of what did happen in a way too.
Yeah,
that became Jesus is the king of the whites. They'll clip that. The E-Crusaders are. I could understand like seeing the EU as like too big of a bureaucracy that's where you're like certain people or nations aren't represented as they would like. You know,
it's very inflexible. Whereas alliances that are created for a specific time and purpose are much more dynamic, much more flexible. The nations who form alliances have genuine shared objectives. It's not just, empty words. They actually do have shared interests. That's why they formed an alliance. So I think that would be my way of going about things. But then I think that there is a reality that needs to be addressed, particularly with regards to a European and an American, like being on the same page. We're all in this together. An example would be this Easter week that's just passed. America is a very Protestant country. It has a very different, culture. It had Americans long ago willingly kind of separated themselves from the way of Europe, the European old world, and they're proud of that. They wanted to get away from European wars of religion, European ruling noble families, and all that sort of thing. And you can see the lingering effects of that. Whereas in Europe, you have a lot of Catholic countries, and they do things very differently. And just over like Holy Week, I saw these, it happens every year, all these American Protestants seeing pictures of Spanish Holy Week where they wear the outfits that kind of look like KKK robes, but they're far older.
The black KKK Kanye outfit that he just wore.
Did Kanye wear one of those too? Yeah. I haven't seen that. Oh my God.
In an interview, he wore a black Klan outfit.
Well, in Spain, they wear them, but they're like hundreds of years older. And they have these processions where they march through the streets and they're carrying like statues of Jesus and the Virgin Mary. And all these American Protestants are like screaming on Twitter, "Look at this satanic ritual." What is this? And so there are real cultural divisions between Americans and, Spaniards or Italians, or even the Brits and the Americans. You see that even though they have a shared language, there's still a lot of difference between the two. And sometimes we don't understand each other. I always see Americans crapping on Europeans for having the shops closed on Sundays. It's like, oh, you lazy Europeans having your siestas. I was like, America used to do that too. Yeah. You've all been psyops. Had a rant like that, right? Yeah. It's so I mean, I just think it's normal to realize that we have developed different countries and different ways of doing things, and we don't always have to be in it together. In fact, sometimes that's really bad, because what if a country, whether it's the United States or Germany, what if their ruling class, their leadership decides to go a very bad route and then just take everyone else along with them? That's kind of happened with the United States dominating the world. And then Germany, for example, when Angela Merkel decided to take in all those migrants, Germany basically, because what Germany does, eventually the rest of Europe does. And so when Germany was in the hands of such a horrible leader that made such a horrible decision, well, it affected everyone else. But if there was more independence and autonomy, and other European countries had more of a safety, a wall of separation protecting them from whatever Germany would decide to do, well, then things might have been much better for those countries. But if we're all in this together, then sometimes we suffer the bad decisions as well.
Yeah. What happens if you have the leader of the EU saying that European Union or Europe is based on, I'm a little quiet here, based on the Talmud? Mm-hmm. When the Talmud says that Rome and Edom and Europe has to fall for Israel to rise and Jerusalem to rise. Like, exactly. So maybe in that sense, it is based on the Talmud. Rome and Jerusalem are diametrically opposites. Rome has to be destroyed. The two cities cannot coexist, and Rome has to go down before Israel can rise up. So maybe she's right that we are based on the Talmud, because it seems like Europe is under attack. And what happens, like you said, with Merkel, if the EU bureaucracy says that certain countries have to take in this many there's a migrant quota of refugees they have to take or something as well. And that's not a hypothetical.
That's a real example.
That has happened. Yeah, that's a real example.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, it's just, it's so funny that line about Rome must fall for Jerusalem to rise, and the two can never be ascendant at the same time. One's success must come at the expense of the other. That's a verse in the Talmud. Rabbis repeat it. You could say, oh, that's just a conspiracy theory, but it's playing out. It's playing out in front of us. We can see it happening, that there's this controlled demolition of Europe, of the West in general, if you want to use that term. We've seen it kind of happening in America too, although people now think, oh, Trump's going to lead us back to the golden age. I highly doubt that. And you can see it, while our civilization has been subjected to a controlled demolition, Israel is out annexing territory, obliterating people with no consequence, never having, I can't imagine a time in history where Israelis have had such a strong identity. They get to be highly nationalistic, highly identitarian, while projecting an ideology to the rest of the world that says that's a bad thing. You should be welcoming and open. So whether or not it's a Talmud verse or a conspiracy, it's observable fact playing out in front of us.
I wanted to get your take. Oh, let's play the power chat. Let's see if I can get this going now. Let's play this. Okay, that didn't work. Hold on. Got to do the controls. Playback enabled. Maybe now it will work now. Okay, maybe this one. Hold on. Sorry about this. How about this tweet then, while I get that figured out. This guy, Apolitical, a big account, popular account on Twitter, says, the majority of Jews in Israel do not practice Judaism. Stop pretending this is a religious struggle. This is one ethnic group trying to ethnically cleanse another and claim their territory. What's your take on this take? Stop pretending this is a religious struggle.
Yeah. I've seen this take in various forms before, where people will try and diminish the religious aspect of what's going on in the Middle East, or even what's going on in our own countries behind the scenes, where we have such Zionist governments. I don't buy it. When you have, the head of state, Netanyahu himself, when you have so many rabbis using verses from the Torah to justify their actions in Gaza, I don't think it's correct.
Just another lazy European, Euro-poor looking, what did that say? Down on Americans. Okay.
Well, this is what I'm talking about. Maybe that's a joke, but maybe that's a parody of what people say on the internet, but that is basically it. These Americans come in and say, oh, you Euro-poors, you Euro-cucks. But then there's this other criticism that they make where, kind of like the E. Michael Jones thing, they'll say, all these Europeans are savages and always at war with each other. And if it wasn't for America keeping the peace, they'd be killing each other. So are we cucks? Are we weak? Are we lazy? Or are we violent savages? Like, which is it,
Yeah, and Jews don't have a good view of Europe at all. They consider, there's the famous clip of, I think, the Jewish journalist from the Atlantic, and he goes, when I leave Europe, I'll spit on the ground. Remember that one?
Yeah. Apparently the Jews have this saying, when the last Jew leaves Europe to go, to the Holy Land, what should he do? Spit. Yeah, okay. Lovely people. Lovely.
Yeah. I see this. Stop pretending this is a religious struggle. That translates to me like stop exposing Judaism. Stop pointing to Judaism and Christianity and Islam as problematic and And, at the core of what's going on, I mean, the Zionist movement is not a religious struggle. That's why they're fighting for their promised land and trying to return there according to the prophecies.
Yeah.
Of course it's a religious struggle.
Did you ever hear it was from a Hamas spokesman that actually confirmed or stated it. So I guess it's real. But apparently one of the motives behind the October 7th attack was to stop the Jews, Israelis, building the Second Temple, continuing their efforts in building the Second Temple. So what we've been witnessing for the past, 18 months since October 7th, including the attack itself, was product of the religious aspect, according to a Hamas spokesman. So of course there's a religious element to this.
They called it Operation Al-Aqsa because the Jews had been storing Al-Aqsa. They want to blow up the dome and rebuild the temple. And then they also, the Hamas guy talked about them having their red heifers, which, is related to the rebuilding of the temple. So of course it's religious. It's not only religion. That's not the only element, but it is one of the foundational elements.
And then I also don't agree with the apolitical's view there, because he's only saying, it's Jews in Israel don't practice Judaism, so therefore Jews in Israel they're not motivated by religion.
Right.
Okay, but that's not entirely the point here. The problem is that we have Gentiles like Pete Hegseth who are motivated by religion and who do want to, if he could, send in American F-35s and, do whatever Israel's bidding is, precisely so that they can build the third temple. He's on camera saying that. He's got Hebrew tattoos. So it's not just a question of whether or not Jews are religious or their religion is influencing their behavior and their decisions here. It's also a question about there are American secretaries of defense who are motivated by the religious aspect here.
Yeah, and let's just say, who cares if it's not the majority? What if it's 49%? That doesn't mean that means it's not a religious struggle. You could have a very vocal and extreme 49%.
Oh yeah, and we've seen on countless occasions that an organized minority is always more influential than a disorganized majority. So even if it is just a minority of highly religiously organized and motivated Jews, why wouldn't that still be a problem? Yeah, it was a very strange thing for me. And I do think it was probably directed at you and your community of genuine noticers, by the way, the real noticers.
Yeah, the actual noticers who noticing you're all believing Jewish myths. I'm trying to find the tweet because I tweeted a few days before. I retweeted Jake Shields, who said he said the same thing. Most Jews are atheist and something like that. And I'm like, so are we blaming atheists for Israel now? How come I searched too? Jake has never tweeted anything about the Torah, not one critical verse of the Torah, but then you're going to blame atheists for it.
Yeah.
And it's like,
it's
so what?
One of those misconceptions where they say, the majority of Israelis aren't nationalistic or don't support what's going on, what they're doing in Gaza. And I don't know where they're getting that, because according to Jewish polls themselves, the vast majority of Israelis are highly identitarian and are okay with what's been done since October 7th.
And even if they're not religious, they're still affected by the religion. Like the Jewish identity is deeply embedded with Judaism. Jews, and if you want to say it's not their religion, it's racial, well, it's like their race made the religion, and then the religion influences the identity of the people. So they are, intimately intertwined. But this was the day before. This is what makes me think Apolitical was directly trying to talk to us, saying, stop pretending this is a religious struggle. How about stop running cover for Judaism? He's saying Judaism we're not struggling against Judaism. That's what it sounded like to me, right? Jake Shields says 75% of Jews are atheists and don't believe in God. Just made up fake statistic, by the way. It's not that high. Although there are a lot of secular and non-religious Jews, only a small percentage of Jews practice Judaism. Their only claim to Palestine is based off a God they don't believe in, promising them land. See, that's bullshit, because lots of them, because of the Bible, think that that's been their land for 3,000 years. And also, so if it was 90% of Jews in Israel did follow the commandments, then Israel's legit, and Christians should support them. Like, is that the logic behind this?
What it seems to me is they fail to understand that, quote unquote, secular Jews or non-religious Jews, they still live according to, actually, again, what our pre-Christian ancestors used to be like. Even if you don't go to synagogue, go to temple, or are a devout believer in the gods, or if you're Jewish, in God, in Yahweh, you are still inextricably linked to your ancestors, to your people, to their customs. You are still wanting what's best for your tribe, for your nation. This was very important for the Romans and the gens, and ancestor worship was just as important as the veneration of the gods. In a Roman's house, they would have a shrine with little figurines of their ancestors that they would pray to, just as much as they would pray to, the protector gods of the house or the Olympians, the major gods. And it's the same with Jews. You don't have to be an Orthodox or Hasidic or synagogue-going Jew to still be a Jewish supremacist or chauvinist or desire that, what's best for Israel always gets fulfilled, gets accomplished. A great example would be like Woody Allen. Woody Allen is very, very Jewish. He's like stereotypically Jewish. And his Jewish identity is immensely important. It's important in many of his films. It's important in his life. But he's secular. And he's often made lots of jokes about religious Jews. But he's still very Jewish, and his Jewish identity is very important to him. So this is a very weak angle to take of saying, I've seen this happen with like Daily Wire types, or who was that guy, the American guy, with the meme, the Change My Mind meme.
Crowder.
Yeah. So he said this too, like, because he would eventually, people who would engage in this stuff have to be exposed and then have to reckon with the countless examples of Jewish influence, of the Jewish presence in things like mass migration or subversion, banking, Hollywood, degeneracy, all that kind of stuff. And so these pro-Israeli types always get put into a really tough position. And Crowder is very pro-Israel, or at least was. I don't know, maybe he's changed. But I remember he was addressing this, and he would say, okay, I get it. There's all these Jews
secular humanist. That's what he said,
exactly.
right?
You already know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
He would say, I get it. Okay, there's Jews that are degenerates in Hollywood and they promote all this filth, and there's Jews that were involved in all this banking shenanigans. But those are secular Jews. Those are secular liberal Jews. My problem is not with the nice religious conservative Jews. My problem is with your problem is with this handful of a minority of secular liberals. And so that's been a long-standing cope that these types come up with.
And it's like, what do you want? You're complaining that Israel's not more Jewish? Like, instead of identifying like following Judaism is the core of the conspiracy, and like the central to the whole conflict in the Middle East over there, these Abrahamic religions. So you want them to be more Jewish and then they'd be legit?
Yeah.
I don't, and I see this all the time from these guys. Stu Peters does the same thing. He goes like, Israel, the fake nation state of secular atheist, and or they'll say Zionism's not Judaism. Zionism is atheist, like Theodore Herzl, and it's just like, you guys are just all bending over backwards to not criticize Torah Judaism.
Oh yeah, and then they do that with like the Khazarian theory and all that stuff. I mean, that's why I just had to be honest about it and take ideas to their logical conclusions, as uncomfortable as that may be. You can't, because otherwise you just end up floundering and looking very, very silly. And Stu Peters looks very silly, and Candace Owens and all the rest of them. Like, like we were saying earlier, if you are always whinging about the Talmud but never have a word to say about the Torah, because you follow the Torah, because you read it, because that book is tucked next to your bedside table, that's a problem. But they can't bring themselves to make these criticisms, because then they'd be criticizing the very things that they believe in themselves.
You put it so well right here. This was a fire quote. Almost 1,000 likes too. See, this is white pilling when you can get 1,000 likes like that. Shoot, where'd it go? There it is. That's not it, actually. It was this one. You said, people like this are nothing but a disgrace and an embarrassment to any nationalist, dissident, or right-wing movement. My patience for them is at an end. And that's how I feel about the kooky kosher conspiracies, kooky kosher Christian conspiracies in particular, or the flat earth stuff, or the, all of it. We're inundated. We're drowned out with all, we're guilty by discredited by association with all of this stuff. It's used for the pretext to delegitimize us. Yeah, absolutely. So that's why we're running out of patience.
The association and the discrediting, because as you know yourself, as you know very well, this isn't easy. Someone accused me of being like a paid a paid grifter shill because I was, anti-Christianity. It's like, how retarded do you have to be? There is no money in our side of things. There's no money in not being a Christian grifter. If I was a grifter, I'd be like, pretending to be a Candace Owens type, or like Jake Shields, who's not even Christian, but he's been going all in on this. That's where the money and the engagement is. It's not in this. And then that if you start touching these third rails, you get deplatformed, you get debanked, you get censored. So this idea of like, it's just a grift, that's one thing. But then when these wackos come in and discredit everything that we're doing by just making it look retarded, that's really frustrating too. And that's why I said, like, I just have no more patience anymore.
Yep. Okay, let's see. I think I got the super chat played out now. Playback enabled, and then I just click redo. Okay. Hold on. Maybe this one. I don't know if it just takes a second or something. Oh, I want this to play, guys. Let's see here. Playback enabled. Save. Events. All right. Temperosa says, give the Jews a couple hundred years and they come up with another story based on the same book. Yeah, they can keep adding to it. They'll have the book of Trump and the book of the fall of Edom if we don't fix things fast. Zornder eat. Oh, there it is. Just took a minute.
Aiden White sent $1 on Rumble. Just another lazy year.
Just gonna play that one over and over again, huh? Here we go.
Zonder, sent $5 Amazon. Video just released a movie Conclave. A day after the Pope died, the script was like a direct mirror of the current situation with the Pope, even considering a black African Pope.
Interesting. I haven't seen that show.
Temperosa sent $5. Give the Jews couple of hundred years and they come up with another story based on the same book.
That's what Christianity was. Okay, and skip. All right. Thanks, guy. Okay.
That one about the what is it? An Amazon series?
Temperosa sent $5.
Give the
Conclave. Yeah, it talked about the death of a pope and having a black pope, apparently.
What do you think about predictive programming?
Yeah, that's what prophecy is. Prophecy is basically predictive programming.
Yeah. Before mass media was their form of it. But that's interesting. I'll have to look into this conclave thing. That's very bizarre.
All right. Well, we're over 2 hours. It was a great talk. It went by very fast. I'm glad to finally have you on. Super based Angelo. Tell everybody where they can find you and any final parting words for us. I enjoyed the talk.
That was great to be on. Like I said, it was an honor to be on your show. It's one of the best. And people can find me on Twitter, Pox's Foxes, or just Angelo Plume. And then my Substack is Pox Populi, still goes by that name. And then also do check out Countercurrents as well, where I'm the managing editor. That's been around for a long time. I'm sure people know about that.
Thanks, everybody, for watching. Let us know what you think in the comments. Thank you all for the support. knowmorenews.org, donate page to find all the links if you want to support the channel. And I will see you guys tomorrow with another news stream. Everybody, take care. And outro.